Outer space's silent killer is radiation, a form of energy that travels as rays, electromagnetic waves, and/or particles. We experience it every day when we step outside into the sun, turn on the lights, microwave food, or use our cell phones. But while these and other more hazardous forms of radiation that we experience here on Earth can cause adverse health effects, the radiation in space is much worse. That's because there are two types of radiation: non-ionizing and ionizing. Non-ionizing radiation is less energetic and can easily be shielded out of our environment. Some sources of this on Earth are power lines, TVs, cell phones, and microwaves. The light from the sun that reaches the Earth is largely composed of non-ionizing radiation, since the ionizing far ultraviolet rays have been filtered out by the gases in the atmosphere, particularly oxygen. And this is a very good thing for us Earthlings. Ionizing radiation is much more dangerous. In outer space, ionizing radiation comes from three sources: particles that are trapped in Earth's magnetic field called radiation belt particles, particles, usually protons, that are shot into space during solar flares, known as solar particle events, and galactic cosmic rays, which are composed of the nuclei of atoms that have had their surrounding electrons stripped away and are traveling at nearly the speed of light. Ionizing radiation has enough energy to alter the substance it travels through. It does this by removing electrons from the atoms in the material, which ionizes them. This can greatly damage the human body and even break apart our DNA, placing astronauts at significant risk for radiation sickness, increased lifetime risk for cancer, central nervous system effects, and degenerative diseases. The amount of risk depends on the dose of radiation that they're exposed to, which is measured in millisieverts. Here on Earth, we typically experience a small dose. For instance, an average person in the US is exposed to about 6.2 millisieverts each year, mostly from radon and medical imaging. However, in space, solar particle events and annual galactic cosmic ray exposure produces a much higher radiation dose. One study measured this to be about 3,500 millisieverts for a large solar particle event, and up to 700 millisieverts each year for galactic cosmic rays. If astronauts are to spend any length of time in space, they need high levels of protection. Space agencies like NASA have safety precautions in place to limit astronauts' exposure to radiation. Currently, these include things like shielding, radiation monitoring, exposure caps, and operational procedures like delaying a spacewalk until after a solar particle event. With current precautions, astronauts experience 50 to 120 millisieverts during a 6-month stay on the International Space Station, with a single day resulting in about 0.7 millisieverts. While this is significantly higher than what we experience on Earth, it lets even the most vulnerable astronaut, a 35-year-old woman, spend 857 days aboard the ISS before reaching NASA's radiation exposure cap, which in her case is 600 millisieverts. NASA uses radiation exposure caps to determine how long astronauts can stay in space. They calculate the cap based on a risk estimate. The limit is the amount of total exposure that would give an astronaut a 3% higher chance of dying of cancer in the rest of their life. But that cap isn't equal for all astronauts. Women are more vulnerable because they are more susceptible to the cancers that radiation can cause due to the nature of their reproductive organs. And younger people are more vulnerable because they have more time to develop cancer in their lives. But more distant missions to Mars, which will require up to 1,000 days in space, will expose astronauts to much higher doses of ionizing radiation, potentially far surpassing the current radiation caps, which range from 600 to 1,117 millisieverts, depending on the astronaut's age and gender. This could increase their lifetime risk of dying from cancer well beyond the 3% limit set by the cap, to over 10%. The reason for the high levels of radiation exposure, even inside a well-shielded spacecraft, is due to the nature of galactic cosmic rays. While solar particle events can be more easily shielded, galactic cosmic rays are more penetrating and move at such high speeds that typical shielding materials can't slow them down. Researchers discovered that to completely block them, the hull of the spacecraft would have to be outrageously thick. So thick that the additional weight and fuel requirements would make the trip impossible. This is why scientists are looking into other protection methods for these trips. One option are wearable vests that protect the most vulnerable areas, like the lungs and reproductive organs. These vests are currently under development, and tests of their effectiveness against radiation are planned for the upcoming Artemis moon mission. However, the companies developing the vests are focusing on solar particle events, so it's unclear how well they'll shield astronauts from the more penetrating galactic cosmic rays. Another shielding technology being explored are electronic surfaces that actively deflect radiation. These are known as active shielding methods and involve the generation of an electromagnetic field similar to that on Earth. But these have some drawbacks as well. Since they require a massive amount of energy, their power comes from superconducting magnets, which are heavy and require a cooling method. But shielding may not be the only way to protect astronauts from radiation. Scientists are now looking to the field of medicine to counteract its effects. One radical idea is to genetically engineer astronauts to make their cells more resilient to radiation. This could be done by turning on or off certain genes, or by combining their DNA with that of a more radiation-resilient animal, like tardigrades. While this may sound like something from a science fiction movie, scientists have already expressed a tardigrade protein in human cells grown in a petri dish, leading to a reduction in the amount of radiation-induced damage. This particular protein, called damage suppressor, prevents the animal's DNA from breaking when exposed to high-dose radiation. The human cells containing the protein had 40% less DNA damage than cells without it. While we're still decades away from genetically engineered astronauts, extreme solutions like this may be necessary to push the human body beyond the limits of its evolution, so it's able to handle environments well beyond those found on Earth. And long-term space missions are closer than you might think. The Artemis mission plans to put the first astronauts on the moon since 1972, with the goal of building a new space station in lunar orbit, and eventually a habitable moon base on the lunar surface. The goal is to travel to the moon and stay there, so we can learn how to build a sustainable colony on other worlds. Boots might be on the ground of the moon again in as little as 3 years. And it will push the human body to its limits. Building the lunar orbiter and ground stations will require hours of spacewalks, an activity that comes with enormous risk. Risk so high that on a previous construction spacewalk on the ISS, an astronaut almost drowned in his spacesuit. To learn more about how the crew saved him and about how NASA plans to keep astronauts safe during this new era of space travel, you should watch Secrets of the Universe, to the Moon and Beyond on CuriosityStream. It's one episode of a brand new 8-part special event on CuriosityStream that details how space agencies are seeking answers to some of the universe's biggest questions. This is one of many incredible series on CuriosityStream. Alone, CuriosityStream is a fantastic educational streaming platform. But now, CuriosityStream has partnered with us to offer an even better package. By signing up to CuriosityStream, you now also get a subscription to Nebula. Nebula is a streaming platform made by me and several other educational YouTube content creators. It's a place where we can upload our videos ad-free, and a place where we can experiment with new, original content. We have so much exclusive content planned for Nebula this year, like a real science series on human evolution, and Real Engineering's new ongoing series, The Battle of Britain. So for just $14.79, you get access to both CuriosityStream and Nebula for the entire year. That's 26% off the usual price, with 2 great streaming services for the price of 1. Plus, signing up is the best way you can support this channel. With your support, we've been able to hire more animators, more writers, and start producing some seriously high-quality films. So go to curiositystream.com/realscience to get in on this incredible deal. And if you're looking for something else to watch right now, you can watch our previous video about the first creation of living robots, or watch Real